Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Weekly Business Roundup. With me, your host, Wadulo Mark Arnold. We're glad you've tuned in, and these are the big stories this week. Government releases 100 billion Ugandan shillings loan for recovery of small and medium enterprises. 25 solar mini-grids commissioned in northern Uganda. Government warns against vandalism of electricity infrastructure, and we give you an insight of the developments on the Central Corridor route. For these and more, stay tuned. It's time for business. 25 solar mini-grids have been commissioned by the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development in Lamore District, northern Uganda. Now, while unveiling the mini-grid plants, Okasayo Polot, the State Minister for Energy, underscored the importance of adopting renewable energy technologies in order to address the energy demand of millions of underserved people across the country. The 25 mini-grids constructed in northern Uganda are powered by solar, a renewable, reliable and eco-friendly source of energy. For a remote area like Palago sub-county in Lamore district, northern Uganda, this initiative presents immense opportunities with potential for productive use of electricity.
Most of our environment is actually being devastated because of charcoal and firewood. We are relying on biomass. We have got to turn that story around using the vast energy potential that we have. Cooking is the major part which takes our biomass.
We want Uganda to move forward and the economy to pick up, and for that, electrification is a precondition. Solar panels for charging phones and running a TV are nice to have, but not nearly good enough. What we need is to produce energy that is sufficient for private businesses and that rely on a constant energy supply.
Besides helping to mitigate climate change, the adoption of solar energy for businesses and home use can tackle rural to urban migration challenge.
I'm pleased to announce that over the next 5 years, we will continue to support this sector, as provision of sustainable energy is an essential prerequisite to achieve sustainable and inclusive growth and foster job creation. Both on-grid and off-grid technologies will be needed to provide electric energy to more than 20 million Ugandans who currently have no access to it.
The local community here is urged to utilize electricity to transform their livelihoods by establishing businesses and adding value to their agricultural produce.
Let us strategically mobilize our commodities, valuable commodities, to be processed by this power. Let us mobilize the farmers to grow much more. Because if we continue at this level of subsistence, we are going to miss it.
This is the hardware, but the hardware, if you don't use it properly, is just the hardware. And if we come back, maybe, Minister, in about 2 years, you and I, we would probably like to see something flourishing.
Minister of Energy under the National Development Plan 3 has prioritized the development of mini power grids, and within the next 4 years, at least 200 plants will be set up across the country. The 40 mini-grids, 25 in Lamore district and 15 in Isinjiro and Rakai districts, are funded by the European Union and the German government to a tune of 18 billion Ugandan shillings. Dennis Igor and Charlotte Amuge for UBC News. The Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development has provided an initial fund size of 100 billion Ugandan shillings under the Small Business Recovery Fund to provide affordable financing loans to businesses affected by COVID-19 pandemic prevention measures. The Small Business Recovery Fund is hinged on various research reports that highlight the cost of capital, cost of transport, the cost and efficiency of power, and the cost and adaptation of technology being the major binding constraints to SMEs.
Therefore, this intervention of the Small Business Recovery Fund seeks to address the first constraint to the relatively high cost of capital and high interest rates, but specifically this time for those businesses which have been impacted by the pandemic. There are also strategies we are putting in place to accelerate, to build on this momentum and accelerate it to ensure that we get back to our target growth rate and also raising household incomes.
Some of the eligibility terms for the loans include a small business operated by individuals, groups, partners and companies employing 5 to 49 people with an annual turnover of 10 million to 100 million Ugandan shillings.
Accordingly, the fund will support small businesses that suffered financial distress because of the pandemic so that they recover. The participating financial institutions will match the government contribution of 100 billion to form a consortium pool of 200 billion Uganda shillings. A borrower or group of related parties shall only access financing once under the fund, once.
The maximum loan amount to a borrower will be 100 million shillings with interest rates of not more than 10% per annum.
So the commercial cost of money does not change for banks, but because the money will be blended with interest-free money from government, that's how the final rate comes down, right? So if you're going to borrow, for argument's sake, 10 million, 5 came from government at zero interest, 5 came from the bank with the bank interest. When it comes together, you're able to borrow 10 million at 10%.
What you see is a product of intense negotiations by different stakeholders. And I would say that overall, what you see is a good package in the following ways. One, in the sense that it specifies who the beneficiaries are. So this means that larger businesses won't benefit from this. Two, it excludes people who have been benefiting from the agricultural credit facility already. Three, it ensures that an interest rate of 10% is only paid on the portion that's provided by the financial institutions.
The goal of this revolving fund is to enhance the capability of small businesses to recover and resume operations at the levels and beyond positions they were at before government instituted the standard operation procedures. Wadulo Makanold for UBC News in Kampala. Investors have been urged to support small innovations and startups towards economic recovery and financial inclusion. This was at the opening of the Kampala Innovation Week 2021.
Startup Uganda, in conjunction with the United Nations Capital Development Fund (UNCDF), has inaugurated the Kampala Innovation Week at Design Hub Bugorobi with the clarion call to Ugandan investors to support new innovations.
So that other sources of financing, commercial banks, other investors, whether they be equity investors or what have you, are more comfortable to come in and invest in these startups. And so that's the idea, that we play an unlocking role, a catalytic role, in order to be able to attract additional financing to the sector.
The exhibition intends to harness job creation through interaction between innovators and entrepreneurs.
While we're really enterprising and there's a lot of incubator programs to support that, we still have a long way to go. Internet accessibility. So when you talk about bringing these technologies and solutions to rural places, the connection is really bad.
Financial inclusion in Uganda is still being challenged by inadequate and poorly spread infrastructure, which calls for policy responses.
Because a lot of these financial institutions need to understand what these financial structures do for these startups and how the need to subsidize those, like interest rates, but also the bodies that we're partnering with need to hear the cry of the startups.
The right knowledge to use these platforms, the right skills. You need to have the right policies in place to make sure that it's an enabling environment.
Financial technologies have been identified as the main component to facilitate development of small businesses and expanding financial inclusion.
Because innovators are able to take solutions that are more available in urban settings and to extend them to last mile communities by fostering these partnerships, by communicating with big providers and being able to broker deals.
The exhibition of Kampala Innovation Week is to run for 5 days, specifically to facilitate and explore the role of innovation entrepreneurs in achieving Uganda's development ambitions of harnessing digital technologies and community transformation. Abdul Nasili Lubwama, UBC News.
Vandals destroying electricity infrastructure will be dealt with like the terrorists, warns Ruth Nankabira, the Minister of Energy and Mineral Development. According to Nankabira, government has lost 260 billion shillings worth of power infrastructure in the last 2 years. In another development, stakeholders in the energy sector have discussed matters concerning the sector at the second edition of the Chigo Thinkers Baraza.
The Minister of Energy and Mineral Development has sent a stern warning to vandals who are destroying electricity infrastructure across the country.
We are going to kuchagua like we used to hunt for illegal fishermen catching immature fish on Lake Victoria and other lakes. We need to work out an operation mechanism, and we have started on this.
Ms. Rose Nankabirwa, who was addressing the media on the sidelines of the Power Forum 2021, likened vandalism to terrorism and deliberate economic sabotage.
The vandalized electricity infrastructure assets are believed to be sold to scrap or steel and aluminium smelters, some service providers of the energy sector who source materials locally, traders of electricity materials.
Her concerns come at a time when the country is registering losses in billions of shillings annually in replacing vandalized towers on the existing power lines across the country. It is estimated that government has lost over 260 billion shillings in the last 2 years. Relatedly, various stakeholders from the public and private sector have shared their thoughts pertaining to the current status of the electricity subsector. This was at the second edition of Chigo Thinkers Baraza on electricity.
Is that true? That they collect taxes, you pay for power that is not consumed, and the era is telling you now at least Karuma and Simba is not part of the tariff structure?
The high electricity tariff, remerging of the current electricity bodies, and the Umeme concession that is approaching its end were the topical issues.
You remerge, because I'm not yet very clear how remerging is going to clearly deal with the issues affecting us at hand right now, particularly the issue of tariffs. Having told you what is driving tariffs, issues of negotiating PPAs in dollars, and then the revenues collected in shillings, issues about unsolicited proposals or unsolicited bids.
We've got to make a decision. Can we make a smooth divorce with Umeme? Or are we going to be with Umeme? If we decide to be with Umeme, let's not always threaten them with being thrown out, because that way they don't invest.
Even as the scope of the private sector participation is increasing in the electricity subsector, financial stability and good institutional governance was emphasized by the panel. Dennis Igor and Charlotte Muge for UBC Business.
Members of various Emyoga circles in Greater Chiboga are appealing to government to develop an internet-run system that will help to track the fund's defaulters. Emyoga is a circle-based revolving fund designed to enrich the livelihoods of citizens working in the informal sector. Robert Orombi, the chairperson of saloon operators in Butemba constituency in Chankwanzi district, says that many of his circle members are defaulting to pay back their loans, and this is hindering their performance.
Tujja kusaba fenga basalu nitwatuula netulabanga kino at least kyandibadde kitekebwamu mu nkola nti engeri tekinologiya gyagenze nga akula ennyo nga ministry mutuyambe mutulowooza tuzimbirayo ka software nti at least ne batekinicrats bano basobole okutrakinga sako zino ez'enjawulo nga bakozesa software oyo abaaliwo.
Speaking to the SACCO members at different parts of Greater Chiboga, the State Minister for Microfinance, Cheyune Haruna Kasolo, says that government will do what it takes for people not to misuse this fund, and asked all political leaders at different levels to work harmoniously. The State Minister is currently on a countrywide tour to assess the first phase performance of the Emyoga program before government embarks on the Parish Model Fund. He pledges to support the well-performing SACCOs with a loan boost of up to 20 million Ugandan shillings. According to the State Minister, the primary role of this fund is to encourage Ugandans to adopt a saving culture, which many SACCO members are starting to adopt.
People have not embraced the saving culture in the two districts, Chivoga and the Chankwanzi. So, but at least 50, they have at least tried, but to a smaller extent. So I have encouraged my teams to always continue with the capacity building and trainings so that these people can actually embrace saving culture. They should not save because they want to secure a loan. The saving should be part of their daily routine.
Emyoga beneficiaries applauded the visionary leadership of His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni for setting up an effective socio-economic empowerment program.
Government in NRM yasobola okutunuulira tweyanziza nnyo tweyanzeege.
Chankwanzi district ffe abasookera ddala kufuna ssente nga 3 ogw'E12 ssente ezatuukira ddala ku akaunti yaffe.
Twafuna obukadde 16 mwetwalanamu 2 naye nga twasevinga obukadde 5 mwetwalo 82. Pozi ssente ezo tukoze bulungi yatuzizza.
Beneficiaries have also been warned not to politicize the Emyoga program, and an appeal has been made to government to proportion sufficient funds that facilitate community development officers who monitor the program.
Chairpersons and leaders, you are supposed to help show us, for example, which Emyoga has contributed greatly to the livelihood improvement of our people, and we shall be asking you. So please take keen interest in this. This is not a party-related project. This is not money for NRM. This is not money for Mr. Museveni and his cabinet, but it is money for all Ugandans.
Chankwanzi district has over 36 working SACCOs and received a tune of 1.120 billion Ugandan shillings, where 360 million has so far been saved and 150 million so far has been recovered from the SACCO members. The Tanzanian Central Corridor is becoming the export-import route of choice for Uganda, a land-linked country. Its efficient multimodal transport system involving water, road and rail is lauded for reducing transport costs and boosting route reliability. Dennis Sigoa with a report.
Roofings Group is one of the largest exporters to Tanzania through the port of Mwanza, and they can attest to this. Since starting to export through the Central Corridor, there have been tangible benefits not only to the company but to their wholesale and retail customers across the vast Lake Victoria.
So we've been exporting to Tanzania, especially the northern part of Mwanza. But we are doing very well. We've been sending there our sheets originally, which we make from here. When we expanded to Namamve, where we started doing where we have a cold rolling mill that does the coil galvanizing process and color coating, we actually introduced our coils, which were originally importing from Japan, but now they are made in Uganda. We are making them from here. We introduced them to Tanzania.
His sentiments are re-echoed by Otim Gilbert, the communications manager at Starbex International, an oil marketing company. After more than 16 years of stalled importation of petroleum products through the port of Mwanza to Port Bell, Uganda, Starbex has taken the lead. Currently, Starbex International imports at least 6 million litres of diesel and petroleum from Dar es Salaam, a quantity that will increase exponentially over the coming years as the company expands its business to cover the whole country.
The last 5 shipments you've had using Mwanza Port Bay route, how has it been for you?
It has been very good. The Tanzanian rails are very perfect, they're in perfect condition. We don't have any slide accidents, meaning that the wagons can rail off the rails. We don't have the rails. A number of the rails usually happen on our Kisumu route, usually we have such minor accidents, but in the central corridor, we haven't heard of that challenge.
Kakira Sugar, based in Ginger, and Bidco, the manufacturers of cooking oil, are also the biggest players on this export and import corridor. These new developments on the central corridor prompted a high-level business delegation to visit Uganda. The Tanzanian public and private sector stakeholders who were in Kampala recently were led by the new Tanzanian Ports Authority boss, Benedict Hamisi.
But overall, generally, the testimony that we have in place and the comparative analysis that we have, this route had managed to cut down 40% of the cost. And as I said, we are now improving. The cost element goes with time. So we want to have a very short time of shipment from Dar es Salaam to Kampala. In the past it used to be 4 days, but we are pledging to have 3 days.
There have been a lot of improvement on the central corridor route, including the rehabilitation of the meter gauge railway from Dar es Salaam port to Mwanza, and also to Isaka and to Kigoma. But specifically for Mwanza, because of the Ugandan cargo. And another improvement is the port has just received new equipment, new handling equipment, a number of them for handling the containers and others. And also
however, as the central corridor's popularity increases, there is a matter that needs urgent attention. Ugandan business community who frequently use the central corridor want more ships with large capacity introduced.
Importation has not been so much because we expected to have more than 10 million liters coming per week. But sometimes you may find that the availability of the vessel.
The vessels, if they were also very available, it would also enhance on how much more we can export. But then a bit of delays for the vessels to come. We were doing like once a month, then there has been an improvement. It came to once bi-weekly. Then now at least we can do twice a week. But we would love to see every day there is something leaving us here going, especially to Tanzania. We are very much now talking about Tanzania.
Their hopes have been on the return of MV Pamba, whose maiden sail after more than a decade of stalling continues to be delayed.
They are doing the final cargo testing. We've already secured a flag certificate from the government, and by the end of this month, the vessel should be able to start fully operating.
As Uganda and Tanzania strengthen their economic relationship, a vast array of opportunities continues to open up for private sector players.
My request to you, Private Sector Foundation of Uganda and Tanzania Private Sector Foundation, is to establish maybe an online portal for business directory between the two countries.
This is supported by an enabling legal and regulatory framework and improvements in infrastructure provided by the respective governments. Dennis Igoa and Charlotte Amuge for UBC News.
Kenya Ports Authority has celebrated 25 years since the inception of its Kampala liaison office in 1996. The country office has brought services closer to the customers and over the years increased Uganda's market share of cargo passing through the port of Mombasa to 23.7%.
The Northern Corridor, served by the port of Mombasa in Kenya, is still the most preferable import and export route for Uganda. Over the years, the market share has grown exponentially, reaching 23.7% in 2020.
Uganda, as it is, it's one of the major users of the port of Mombasa, second to Kenya. So we are celebrating a relationship. And I hear people are talking about marriage, but you know what has happened to marriage these days? Ours is not marriage, it's a brotherly bond.
Port of Mombasa has increased its efficiency. It has been automated, and as we are talking now, officers of URA are based in Mombasa, where they make sure there is the issue of taxation.
The increase in transit cargo has led to appropriate investments towards modernization and expansion of the port facilities. KPA Kampala office is credited for reducing time taken on getting feedback on the status of cargo to Uganda and verification of port charges.
We started with shares of 14%. What came through the port of Mombasa, the total throughput or cargo volumes, 14% was Uganda cargo. Right now, Uganda has grown tremendously, and it contributes to 25% of everything that is delivered at the port of Mombasa. If you look at the transit market means the land-linked countries. That is Uganda. Uganda is the biggest. You have Rwanda, you have Burundi, you have Eastern DR Congo, and South Sudan. Out of that, what comes through the port of Mombasa, 70% is consumed locally, that is Kenyan market, 30% in the transit markets.
Kenya has completed the connection between the SGR, standard gauge railway from Naivasha, to the meter gauge railway at a place called Longonot. Now, that is good news for us as Uganda, because then you rail your cargo from Mombasa into Naivasha ICD on SGR, then move it on MGR, the ordinary line, the meter gauge, up to Maraba. As you are aware, the Uganda government is also doing repairs on the meter gauge. So I can without doubt confirm that we are going to even move from the 4 days to even 2.
Despite the unprecedented impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Port of Mombasa handled 25.17 million tons from January to September, compared to 25.05 million tons in the corresponding period in 2020, which is believed to be a notable sign of resilience. Charlotte Amuge for UBC Business.
The other thing that is monitored by the government is to make sure that there is no shortage in the country. Now, we as government set what we call a reserve price. Reserve price is to ensure that our players do not overcharge you at the pump. As we speak, no one has exceeded the reserve price that we set as a country.
As we draw closer to the festive season, our partner Kampala Serena Hotel lit its Christmas tree. Let's take a look at what they had to say.
My name is James Odenyo, the food and beverage manager. I'm here to launch this special occasion. It's all about Christmas. Look behind me. We are launching the Christmas tree. What we are saying is that the season is here and Serena is open. We've got creative packages for our guests. Our staycation is here once again. Very interesting rates. So you can choose to leave your home and come and stay in Serena. Remember, it's about food. This time around, as part of corporate social responsibility, we have partnered with the Elderly Network Finance Trust located in Mukono to share love with the vulnerable, and these are the elderly. So we shall be teaming up with the network, a foundation, to tell the elderly that there's another chance. And our dream is to enlist into the objectives of the network. It's a very exciting concept that we believe will not only be for Christmas, but will be for something to remember in months or years to come.
Thank you for joining us That's on this week's episode of the Weekly Business Roundup. Join us next week, same time, same place. We're coming to you from the Kampala Serena Hotel. From the team and I, it's good night.